Little Red Riding Hood. Once upon a time, Little Red Riding Hood lived with her mother in a cottage in the woods. One day, Little Red Riding Hood's mother sent her to visit her sick grandmother. She had not walked far when a wolf jumped out at her. Little Red Riding Hood was scared, but the wolf smiled and asked her where she was going. To visit my grandmother, she replied. And where does your grandmother live, my dear? Asked the wolf kindly, too kindly. She lives in the house in the middle of the woods, said Little Red Riding Hood. The wolf bounded away out of the sight and did not stop until he had reached the house in the middle of the woods. Once there, the wolf knocked on the door. A voice inside called out, "Who is it?" "It is I, grandmother." Little Red Riding Hood. "Come in, my dear," grandmother called. The wolf opened the door, leapt in, and roared out at Red Riding Hood's grandmother. She was so scared that she jumped out of the bed and hid in a closet. A little while later, Little Red Riding Hood reached her grandmother's house and knocked on the door. A gruff voice inside called out, "Who is it?" "It is I, grandmother." "Little Red Riding Hood." "Come in, my dear," called the voice. Little Red Riding Hood opened the door and stepped in. The wolf was sitting in the bed wearing grandmother's nightgown. "What big ears you have, grandmother," Little Red Riding Hood examined. "All the better to hear you with," the wolf replied. "What big eyes you have, grandmother," Little Red Riding Hood exclaimed. "All the better to see you with," the wolf replied. "And what big teeth you have, grandmother," Little Red Riding Hood cried. "All the better to eat you with," the wolf sneered. He was just about to swallow Little Red Riding Hood when a friendly woodcutter heard the commotion and ran into the house. The wolf was so startled that he leapt out of the grandmother's bed and ran away into the woods. He was never seen again. "Help! Help!" cried a small voice from the closet. The woodcutter opened the closed door, and out fell Little Red Riding Hood's grandmother, scared but safe. The woodcutter helped grandmother back into bed. Then he walked Little Red Riding Hood through the woods to her mother's cottage just in time for supper. The moral of the story tells us never to speak to strangers on the way in the woods.